tap a hole, put a fastener made out of the same material in that hole. The hole is slightly larger, you use a patch, and even if it's a very large pizza box size hole, we had a way to cover it with a very large flexible sheet of material that was made out of this same high temperature material so it would survive. So that was kind of a unique problem, and that's where we got the idea for basically trying, developing this technique for not only coming up with innovative conceptual engineering design, that this ICE methodology that we use in this course, teaching students how to work together on teams, teaching them how to work creatively using biologically inspired design, a theory of inventive problem solving, coming up with multiple ideas, and then how do you evaluate those ideas? We call the ideation mode, and then how do you go into laboratory and rapidly prototype and test these ideas and collect this information. These are skills that large companies would like to have, especially when they're working in the conceptual design phase. Before they narrow it down to one idea, right, and they rely on that one idea to solve their problem, you're able to look at multiple ideas simultaneously. So, we tested this out with, we developed a course to do this. We call it the ICE methodology. We went to Penn State. We used professors from Penn State, Georgia Tech, and MIT. And we took 30 young NASA engineers, and we gave them a problem that NASA couldn't solve. We wanted to solve the problem of landing a space capsule on land. Right now, some of these future capsules, like by Boeing, are going to land on land. But currently, the United States does not have any space capsules that land on land, but the Russians do. So we wanted to take this problem, and in 1 week's time, we ran the young engineers through this program at Penn State, much like we want to run these programs at the university and high school level. And the engineers at NASA came up with dozens of ideas to solve this problem. We only took one of those ideas, and a young master's degree student at MIT, Sidney Doe, and about 8 undergraduates from Penn State and MIT basically worked on this problem for about 2 years, and with very little money, and with very little help from people and subject matter experts at NASA, they came up with a solution using airbags that not only solved the problem that NASA couldn't solve, but they did it for much less weight, and their solution would enable a lot more habitable volume inside the capsule when they're in orbit. So the program's been running for about 6 years. It started when I was on detail at NYU in 2010 to 2012, and now it's 2019, right, in many different forms. But now we're at the point where we're going to operationalize this program. But the way it will work is really we need to connect students at all different age levels together on these challenges, okay, to help stem the leaky STEM pipeline, if you will. So we'll all be working on similar challenges, and the creative ideas will really flow from the youngest students up, because I think they're the ones that are more free. They don't know what they don't know. They haven't been told their ideas won't work, and you're going to find out a lot of their ideas will work. And then the mentorship comes from the really great graduate students and subject matter experts at these universities, down to the educators at the high school level and the students at the high school and middle school level. So that's the way the program is supposed to work. This is just a view from my launch.
3 engines up and running.
In July
2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Discovery.
Of 2005.
America's new journey to the moon.
That was a long time ago, 2005, right? I was a heck of a lot younger. You hear those birds? Well, this is what happened during our launch. So you can plan as best as you can, but anomalies happen. You know, that could have been a very bad day if that bird fell over on the other side of the vehicle. We were doing about 100 miles an hour before we even cleared the tower. That would have easily gone through the windshield, would have caused a major problem. Another thing that happened on our vehicle was that there was another large piece of foam that people said would never come off. Remember those engineers that said it would not be a problem? Some of those same engineers said, we don't have to take this piece of foam off because there's no way that foam is going to come off. It was a piece of foam right around in this region right here. After we jettisoned the solid rocket motor there, you're going to see another large piece of foam come off. Piece of foam that people said would never come off. 1 in 10,000 chance. As this gets jettisoned, so that large piece of foam came from what they call a protuberance airload ramp. And you also see other pieces of foam that continue to come off the external tank. So we were never able to solve this problem. Foam was not supposed to come off the vehicle, but it comes off the vehicle, and we had to basically be prepared for an impact by that foam. So one of the other technologies that we developed were ways to inspect the vehicle to make sure our vehicle wasn't damaged before we returned to Earth. So before we dock with Space Station, we do a backflip. And this is a camera from the crew on Space Station looking at the belly of the vehicle to see if there was any damage before we even made it to orbit, and did a detailed inspection of the vehicle, see if any foam hit it, any birds hit it. And you notice, when we did that backflip, you notice there was something sticking out of the belly of the vehicle. This was what they call a piece of gap filler. In between, we have about 30,000 tiles on the belly of that vehicle that are very fragile, and they protect the heating. They protect the vehicle from overheating on the belly of that vehicle. They insulate the vehicle. Piece of gap filler was sticking out. If we would have returned without, we had to do an emergency EVA in order to pull that gap filler. We had to design a special spacewalk, put Steve Robinson at the end of the robotic arm underneath the belly of the vehicle. We did this in a matter of days, planned this entire complicated spacewalk, and he had to pull that gap filler from 2 different regions on the belly of the vehicle. If we didn't pull that gap filler, people on the ground, friends like Pete Naffo, did the calculations and said we would probably burn up during Earth entry, and I wouldn't be here talking to you. That's why we have really smart people that understand the physics of these very complex problems. Okay, well, the next vehicle that launched, STS-121, had a very similar thing happen with a gap filler sticking out, only it was at the tail end of the vehicle. We left it in, and then what we did was, because it wasn't in an area that would cause critical damage, we let the vehicle fly back with that gap filler sticking out. A lot of people said it would probably fall out. The gap filler didn't fall out. And you see what happens is it basically trips the boundary layer, and it causes a very high heating in that region after that gap filler, just like they predicted. One of the other pieces of technology we developed were basically these cameras, these high-definition cameras and laser rangefinders to basically do the inspections of the wing leading edge and also the belly of the vehicle. So right when we got up on orbit, we basically take out the robotic arm, we grab this boom, and we start inspecting the vehicle in order to see if we got hit with anything during our launch. And these were some of the procedures we put in place so that we could make sure that all the shuttle crews would fly safe. We had experiments in the payload bay that basically mimicked damage to the shuttle tiles and the wing leading edge. And we had the astronauts go out there and see how they would repair that damage if they had to do a spacewalk. So this was very much an experimental mission where we were testing this different technology, and we were testing these procedures that astronauts might have to use in the case of a similar impact event. And then we fly back, and you see the outside of the vehicle, that orange glow. We're inside that fireball. This is us during entry. Eileen Collins is the commander, Jim Kelly's the pilot, and they're flying back. And this is us re-entering. We landed in Edwards Air Force Base on the dry lake bed out there in California because the weather was not that great at the Cape. And that's it. Thank you very much. So do we have any questions? Do we have time for questions, Jim?
A couple minutes for questions, sure.
That bird strike, was that on your flight?
Yeah, that bird strike was on my flight. Any other questions? Anyone have any other questions about the program or how we solve these problems? Go ahead.
When you were re-entering, what was the flash? Like, there was a couple of flashes.
You know, I'm not quite sure what those flashes were. I really can't tell you why it seemed that way for the camera. I don't know whether the camera, how it was looking out the window and actually watching that plasma on the outside of it. It might have just been an artifact of the camera. I'm not positive. Or the actual plasma that you're in, it basically pulses like that. A very good question. Any other questions?
I was wondering about the idea of, you were mentioning if you have to fail, you want to do it in an intelligent way. And the idea of also recognizing a problem, that sounds like one of the most important things and also one of the most difficult things.
Yeah, and so that's why when you're starting out and you're coming up with ideas on your team for how you want to solve these problems, one of the things I want to teach students and also the engineering teams that I work with is, as you're looking at this problem, try to identify all the different ways it could fail. And if you're not sure, it's always good to put that idea out there and get other people to critique it. And looking for subject matter experts from multiple different disciplines to take a look at that have some knowledge of solving problems like this, what could potentially go wrong. Because those people that have worked on this for years at a time, and think about it, with today's technology, in this cybersocial world we live in, you can reach out and try to find these experts all around the world. Go on LinkedIn, search on ResearchGate or these other websites where scientists and researchers are working on a particular problem, and just ask them for help. And you'll be surprised how willing they are to help you solve your problem or to look at what you're doing and possibly raise issues with how you're doing it. Because I guarantee you, as you try to solve these problems, other people have tried to solve these problems before. And maybe they're old folks like me and the technology was totally different. And now, if they couldn't solve them then, maybe the technology is at a point where it could be solved now. But try to have other people objectively look at your ideas and assimilate those questions and those responses as to how this could possibly fail. Don't be afraid of asking yourself how your ideas could fail. And be very objective and obtain that criticism, because that criticism and that critique of your idea is very valuable to you. So don't be defensive when other people are looking at your problem. Any other questions?
That one right in front of you, sir.
Where am I missing? Oh. Why, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that. Why is bird strike what? Still not hearing you. Why is the bird strike not an issue?
Testing. There we go. So why is so since the external fuel tank is jettisoned, and it, from what I understand, burns up in reentry, why is the fact that a bird hit the coating an issue?
No, I wasn't worried that the bird hit the external tank. I was worried that after the bird bounced off the external tank, it hit the orbiter vehicle. See, what happens is on our vehicle, remember the orbiter is alongside the external tank. All the other time, the capsule is on the pointy end of the rocket, right? So stuff coming off that external tank, that foam, can hit the vehicle with the people in it, right? And so we really didn't care about the bird hitting the tank, right? But the tank hit the bird, and if the bird went into the vehicle, we were in trouble. Any other questions? Okay, one more?
Do you have any advice for high school students while you're on careers in engineering?
Yeah, so advice for high school students wanting to go into careers in engineering. What I would do is, you know, because you're going to be spending a lot of your parents' money picking a college and picking a field of engineering, so now is the time for you to really try to understand what these different fields of engineering do, right? Find out if that's something that's passionate to you. We have computer engineering, mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering, civil engineering. Which branch of engineering is right for you? What aligns with your passion is in your interest? Some of the branches of engineering are very similar, you know, and then once you become an engineer, you know, you get this very broad background in school about what aerospace engineers do. You might understand fluid mechanics, flight mechanics, how to understand the stability of an aircraft or a spacecraft. But what if you're only interested in structural analysis? How to analyze the structure for impacts, for different kinds of loads, and how the vehicle deforms and deflects. Because really, when you start working for a company or an organization, you're going to be specialized in a particular area. And so if it's structural mechanics is your thing, you could be a civil engineer and you could be working on aerospace, designing an aerospace system. So try to understand and research what different engineers do. If you have the opportunity to actually have an internship, I highly recommend going to companies and seeing if you could basically shadow them in the summertime. They have openings at NASA